Uh, so I'll do a little introduction for anyone who's just joined us. I know we've got folks slowly uh, entering the webinar. My name is Bianca Machuda, and I am a community engagement specialist for Austin Development Services, and I coordinate the Land Development Academy for the City of Austin. So the Land Development Academy sessions offer a deeper look at the site plan review process from experts across the City of Austin departments who work with site plans. So if you've never been here before, welcome. And if this is your first time, welcome back. We'll get started in just a couple more minutes. A reminder for everyone that we do have Land Development Academy mugs for anyone who's attended 2 or more classes. So if you have attended 2 or more classes, go ahead and send me a message however you please. You can put it in the chat, or you can email me or email DSD Communications at AustinTexas.gov, and we can coordinate a way for you to pick up your mug. And just another little announcement for anyone who's still coming in. We actually have 2 presentations in July. So our second presentation is going to be in a couple weeks on July 22nd. We'll learn about floodplain review and regulations. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I'll go ahead and do my spiel one more time for the new folks. My name is Bianca Machuda. I am the Community Engagement Specialist for Austin Development Services. And thanks again for joining Land Development Academy, where we take a deeper look at site plan review from experts all across the city of Austin who work with site plans. So we've got a good number of folks in the webinar, and to help us track our attendance, I'm going to ask if you are representing a group of people. For example, if you are signed in and there's actually a room full of folks with you, go ahead and enter into the chat box how many people are in your group with you today. And one more time, just to spotlight that we do have American Sign Language interpretation. And if that is something that you're needing or wanting, you can hover over the interpreter's image, their video, and there'll be 3 little dots that appear, and you can select to pin those interpreters for your convenience, okay? So go ahead and review our engagement format for today. In case you're new, we're going to start with a presentation. We have 1 hour set aside, and we will close with a Q&A. So questions can be posted in the Q&A bank at any time by selecting that option at the bottom of your screen, or you can ask your questions live during the Q&A portion by using the raise hand function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any issues with any of the functions in Zoom, you can chat one of the meeting hosts and we can try to troubleshoot with you. While we hope to be able to answer all of your questions, if there are any questions that we don't immediately have an answer to, we will post a follow-up response. And another note is that we are recording the session. So you'll receive a link to the presentation and the recording via email as soon as they're ready. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Paul Kaiser. Excuse me if I said your last name wrong. And Paul's going to kick off our presentation today.
Great. Thank you very much, Bianca. Yes, that's right. Paul Kaiser. And I'm working with Austin Water for about 16 years now. And I've been in this with this OSSF group for about about 9 years. And so, what I want to talk to you today about is properties that have existing septic systems that are going to be redeveloped. We get this question a lot, whether or not property can keep their existing septic system when wastewater sewage mains are available. And so this will be applicable in our full purpose city limits and the areas that are annexed as limited purpose boundaries where city's health and safety ordinances apply. So if you look on, so it just took the screenshot from the property profile city web viewer. And so that green area where it says limited purpose planning and zoning health safety is the important area. If it doesn't have the health safety, then it's most likely not Austin Water's jurisdiction. And it would probably be either Travis County, Hayes County, or LCRA jurisdiction. And if your property falls in those areas, you would have to be talking to them directly to figure out the same information. So anyway, could you please go to the next slide? And so I want to go over some of the rules a little bit. So there is a connection requirement in the local amendments to the Uniform Plumbing Code. There's also a connection requirement in the native Uniform Plumbing Code, but our local amendments have several exceptions, and where the ability to keep your septic system when you're redeveloping it lies actually in those exceptions. So can you go to the next slide, please? And so the native language is at the top, and this is pretty clear. So if your property is within 100 horizontal feet of a wastewater main, of a public sewage disposal system, then you'd be required to connect to it when you're developing a property. But it goes on to show 4 areas where connection is not required. And the ones that we are talking about are number 3 and number 4, but mostly number 3. So this is areas where it has an existing private sewage facility, and Austin Water has determined that that facility can be used to support the new development or change of use. And so there's some factors it has to have. The age of the system is considered, and the capacity it was originally designed for, and whether or not we actually have records for that system, or maybe another jurisdiction may have records. But so these all of these things need to be true in order for this to be used. And so the next thing I want to talk about is actually, if you go to the next slide, is where we have TCEQ. We have this is the code that relates to, or that governs on-site sewage facilities. And so they have this term that's used throughout the rule book called alter. And it's this, a lot of things point back to this term. And it's a defined term in Chapter 285. If you can go to the next rule. And so this is the full definition. So it's basically anytime you change your septic system to the point where you essentially need a new system. And so the one that we're talking about doing when we get this question is there's going to be a change in the planning materials, meaning the septic system was designed for one use, but now you're proposing a new use for it, we would consider that to be a change in planning materials. And so we do have a mechanism or an instrument for doing that in our department. It's called the license amendment, and that's an amendment to your license to operate the on-site sewage facility. And so that's what we're mostly going to be talking about, is whether or not your development is going to cause you to have altered your septic system. And so if you do alter your septic system, then you have to have a permit to do that. And so a new permit means it has to be a new system would have to be installed under today's code, or you would have to connect to wastewater. So we can go to the next slide. We have this handy flow chart that this is what I use when I'm reviewing a case that comes through. And so it's covers most items that come up, and the important parts here are on the ovals at the end, whether or not you need a new permit, or there's a license amendment, or there's a minor development review. And so we'll go through a few cases on here or in this presentation, just to give you an idea of what we're looking for and what you can keep potentially, or when you can potentially keep your system, and when you would have to connect. And so this first case is so this is just in this image. So that red dot is a parcel of land, or excuse me, the red square. There's a parcel of land with an existing septic system, and you can see the green line to the southeast corner. That is an active and available wastewater main. And so in this scenario, you're going to take that piece of property, which currently was designed as a daycare facility for 15 children. And your proposed use is you're going to redevelop this into just a general office use with 10 full-time employees. And so the important part here is for this one is going to be there would not be any increase to the nature of influent, and it won't increase the use or the quantity of influent. And so if we can go to the next slide, this points you back to our flow chart. And so the important part here is that you're changing use. So yeah, we do need to take a look at this. But will that system or that proposed use, will it be an increase in the permitted flow or the permitted wastewater strength? And in this case, it wouldn't be. So you have a 15 children for a daycare is typically a lot more water use than 10 employees. So you would actually have a decrease in use, and it would probably be a decrease in the wastewater strength, meaning like the strength of effluent. And so if you follow the flow chart, it'd be a yes for changing use, but then it'd be a no for if you've exceeded either of those parameters. And we would then ask you to submit an application for a license amendment. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that license amendment process is, because you're not actually out of the woods yet. So far by the rule, it looks like you have everything in line where you could keep the system, but now we need to have the system professionally evaluated and have calculations prepared by a registered sanitarian or a professional engineer. And they would actually be submitting a letter to us with your application stating that the system can be used for the proposed for the new proposed use. And so if it's if this is approved, then you're good to go. You can continue use of that septic system on that facility as long as you don't uh, or until such point as you've developed beyond the limits of the system. If it's denied, then that would be because the system cannot, in the opinion of the designer, in the opinion of the designer, they wouldn't be able to, their proposed use wouldn't be supported by the septic system. And so typically this happens because you have a tank that's not structurally sound, like there's cracks in the sidewalls or something like that. And so if in that case, if you have a tank that is compromised, or you have a drain field that is maybe not accepting effluent at the rate that it should be, then those would be indications that that system can't continue to support that property. And so in that case, a lot of times we probably would never see this. It wouldn't be, once you have it evaluated, you would realize that there's no reason to submit this, but this is something we would deny. And we would say that you need to get a new permit. And so if you can go to the next slide, please. I guess I should have put another slide in here, but yeah, so if you get to the point on the flow chart where a new permit is needed, but you have wastewater available, then connection would be required and you'd have to abandon the system. So I'm going to move on to our next case. This is one where connection would be required. And so it's kind of an opposite from our last scenario. So we have an auto shop that has 15 full-time employees, but you want to redevelop this into a daycare center with 10 children. And this is the same parcel. And so you can see we have the septic system is active and there's a wastewater main available. And so because in this case, we are actually we're not increasing the wastewater usage, but we are going to be increasing the wastewater strength. Because the daycare center would have a heavier load than the daycare center. Than an auto shop. Then if we can go to our next slide, it'll show our flow chart. And we're starting down that same path where there's a change of use. But in the larger rectangle, our calculations for the strength of wastewater would push you beyond the limits of the existing system. And you go down to the yes, where it says submit an application for a new permit. So in this case, it says to submit an application, but part of that is the first thing we always check is wastewater available if we receive an application, and if wastewater main is available within 100 feet, as noted in that code we referenced earlier, that we will not be accepting that application, and we'll tell you you need to follow the pathway to connect to abandon the septic system and connect to the sewer. Okay, and if we go to the next slide, please, we have a third case where connection is required, and so in this one, there's not going to be a change of use. Say it's an office building, and you're still going to use it as an office building. That same piece of property has a wastewater main available within 100 feet. But in this case, you also want to build a shed. And that shed is actually going to be in the drain field area. And so, and if there's nowhere else for you to put that shed and you've got to have it for this new office building, then then what you're proposing would be an alteration to the septic system. And so that would be, if we can go to the next slide, points us back to the chapter 285 rules of alter. And so I'm highlighted in different section here. Letter D is a change in construction. And so putting that shed on your drain field would mean you would have to move your drain field, and which would require a new permit, and would go through that same loop of does it have wastewater available within 100 feet? If yes, then you have to connect and abandon the system. And so this is one example. It actually had a very recent example that a business wanted to install a pickleball court. It's kind of the same scenario, but they're very limited on space, and they had to essentially put it where the septic tanks were, and so that is touched down the same path, and they had to connect to the available wastewater main. And so the in summary, we get this question very often: Can I continue using the OSSF during the remodel? And it truly just it sometimes yes, and it really depends on what it was originally designed for, and a big component is the condition of the system, whether or not it is it can continue to be used. There's a lot of times these septic systems are not as well maintained, and then it might be obvious that they would fail under continued or increased usage. And then it depends on the type of development that you're proposing, whether or not it's going to be a change of use, which would cause an increase in water usage or wastewater strength. And go to the next slide. We have a lot of useful links here. This top one is our website for on-site sewage facilities, and we have links to everything else in here too. But we have our local private sewage facility codes. It's chapter 15-5, and TCEQ is Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. This is their website where they have all of their state rules, which we have to follow all the state rules, but we have additional rules for our jurisdiction. And the property profile map, that's the very first slide where I showed you the jurisdictions that came from property profile. And there are a lot of web maps, which I'm sure many of you are used to using. But the property profile is by far the most useful one for this part. And I believe that is my last slide. And yeah, I believe Bianca would take it from here.
Thanks, Paul. So I guess we are now in our Q&A section of our program today. There's two ways to answer questions, as I mentioned at the beginning. One option is to post your question to the Q&A bank by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and I can read your question and Paul will go ahead and respond. And the other option is to ask your question verbally. And to do that, you'll use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen. And I'll go ahead and let you know that you can be unmuted and you can voice your question. So to ensure that we're covering questions in both formats, I'll go ahead and toggle between those two. And I will start. I see there's a couple of questions coming through the Q&A chat box. So let's see. Our first question is from Rye. Thanks for joining us again, Rye. And Ray's asking, is there any specifications as far as drip irrigation versus a spray field?
Um, there are different specifications for the design of systems if you're installing a new system. So today we're talking about commercial properties, and one of our local amendments um, is that commercial facilities cannot utilize spray station or spray irrigation drain fields. Um, but also we're also talking about redeveloping through a license amendment, so an existing system here. And so new construction, a commercial site, you would not be able to use a spray, but it is possible you could continue using that if it was previously permitted as a commercial site and you're just changing the use and everything else is good, then we would then yes, you could continue to use the spray field system. But as far as what can be built on it, that you still wouldn't be able to encroach on any setbacks that are in code. And so whether it's a drain field of spray or drip, there are some there's additional distance requirements for spray. Drip systems can actually run all the way up to the edge of a building, so you can get much closer if you're proposing a new building as part of your design. But yeah, I can point you to where those specific setbacks are if you need them.
Great answer. Thanks, Paul. Right. Our next question comes from Thomas, and he's asking, does what you presented apply within the 5 mile ETJ if a property is not served by Austin Water?
Uh, so our jurisdiction is only full purpose city limits and the limited purpose planning and zoning, health and safety. And so it does not include 2 mile ETJ or 5 mile ETJ. And so if you're in the 5 mile ETJ with your property and it's not served by Austin Water, it's most likely in the Travis County or Hayes County jurisdiction.
And I'll give it a couple more minutes to see if anyone else has any additional questions come up. I don't have anything in the Q&A box. I'm not seeing any hands go up, but let's give it a couple more minutes. While we wait to see if anyone has any additional questions, I just wanted to welcome you all to take our post-engagement survey and also to visit our webpage if you haven't yet, the Land Development Academy webpage. That's where you can find all the upcoming classes. And our next class, as I had mentioned before, is coming up in a couple of weeks on July 22nd. It's about floodplain review and regulations. Let us know how we did. Take that survey. Come join us in a couple of weeks. And yay, I got a hand raise. Let's see. Rise up again. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, my question just so I'm clear. It seems like the only way that you wouldn't need to connect to an existing wastewater main is if, even if it's like within 100 feet, is if the usage doesn't increase and the condition is good. Otherwise, every other time you'd have to connect.
Yes,
Okay.
sums it up very well.
Okay.
Yes.
Makes
And
sense.
there are in that so in that connection required slide, I don't know if we can go back to it. There are some options that I didn't touch on, but in so where it says the property owner, so if your system is not in good shape, and you are within 100 feet, but there's some significant hurdle to connection, you can you can make a request to Austin Water. It's actually supervisor, Rana Holmes, is the one who handles those. And you would basically present what hurdles you have to connection, and it's possible you would be allowed to install a new septic system. But I've only seen it a couple times, and they're usually very severe topographical features that cause that.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Any other questions today? Thanks. Thanks all for being here. Thank you, Paul, for presenting. It's a topic we don't hear about a lot, so I'm glad we were able to spotlight it today. Do you have any closing words for us before we sign off?
Well, yeah, thank you for having me, and I really was happy to speak to this group because we do get a lot of questions, and a lot of times we hear that people have bounced around to a lot of different places before they get to us, and I realize that's frustrating. But we do have an OSSF request, like general inbox, which is, I don't know if we can put it in the chat. It's OSSF at AustinTexas.gov, and even if your question is whether jurisdiction based or something like that, we'll answer you quickly and get you in the right set you down the right path, whether with us or with another agency. We do have good contacts with all the agencies around here, so I'd be happy to help with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. I did get that in the chat. And as a reminder to anyone who's still with us, we will be sending out a PDF of the slide deck and the recording as well. And if you're interested in any of those materials from past sessions, you can find those on the Land Development Academy webpage. So we'll see you all in a couple of weeks for floodplain review and regulations on July 22nd. Thanks again, everyone.